Satanism, to me, is...
During the 80s and 90s, a series of events took place that led to an explosion of media coverage and an obsession with Satanism and so-called devil worshippers. People became convinced with the idea that Satan worshippers worked in secret and were most feared due to the idea that they abducted children for the purpose of ritual abuse or sacrifice. Although many claimed that through hypnosis they had recalled these childhood events and experiences, when the claims were investigated, many were found to have very little or no proof. However, by this time, the media had already sensationalized the topic and it had become worldwide. Satanic panic was now widespread. Satanism can be traced through history in many different forms. The idea of good and evil is seen throughout the Bible and Christianity, and over the years groups have often been accused of devil worship, with pagans and witches being condemned for their use of magic. When looking at modern Satanism, Jean Lafontaine, an anthropologist who looked at ritual abuse claims, said that satanic groups were a reaction against what they see as a repressive and authoritarian morality and social codes. However, she also made clear that whilst Satanism sells newspapers, there is a big difference between real Satanists and alleged satanic abuse. Satanism is therefore often split into two types, symbolic and theistic. The symbolic Satanists follow aspects or concepts of Satanism and satanic ideology, often seeing themselves as their own gods, following their own destiny and making their own future. The Church of Satan is an example of this symbolic Satanism and was founded by Anton LaVey in 1966 and soon gathered a large following, including celebrities such as Marilyn Manson.
Satan can take the form of a beautiful woman. Satan can take the form of a sleek animal. An automobile can be very satanic. These things can be anthropomorphized into Satan.
In America, Satanism is sensationalized and kind of misunderstood, and people associate it with worshiping the devil and things like that. But it's really a philosophy about individuality and self-preservation. It's about, being your own God. And, that's a lot of the things that I've agreed with, so that's why I became friends with him.
In contrast, theistic Satanists believe that there is an actual supernatural entity that can interact within the mortal world. However, the Satan they worship differs from the traditional Christian one of evil. Instead, they see Satan as more of a destructive, innovative one. One famous case of a so-called satanic murder was that of the murder of Gary Leos by Ricky Casso in 1984. Casso stabbed and burnt Lowers to death before gouging out his eyes, and there was also reports of stones being forced down his throat. Before his death, Casso told Lowers to say you love Satan, but when Lowers replied, I love my mother, he was killed. Casso told people that the murder was a human sacrifice and that he was commanded by Satan, who would often appear as a black crow. Despite the media coverage focusing on devil worship and Satanism, as well as the teens' love of rock music, Casso in fact had a history of drug abuse as well as spending time in psychiatric care. The Satanic Panic of the 80s and onwards was first brought about through a book called Michelle Remembers. It was from here that rumours started to grow of satanic abuse. The book talks of hypnosis sessions that reveal suppressed memories of abuse when she was 5. Allegedly, she was tortured, locked in cages, and forced to take part in various rituals that involved murdered children and adults. The media coverage became huge, and whilst the book was eventually found to be fabricated due to false memory syndrome, the damage was already done. During this time of moral panic, absences from school increased as parents feared their children were no longer safe, and the sale of guns increased dramatically. Town hall meetings were held with so-called anti-Satanist experts to give talks on how to protect your family or how to report someone you may suspect of Satanism. This led to a modern-day witch hunt frenzy, with many innocent people being arrested after their own neighbours, friends or family turned them in. Another famous case of satanic ritual abuse that came about during the Satanic Panic was the McMartin preschool case. that began in California in 1983 and went on to become one of the longest and most expensive cases in US history, lasting 3 years and costing $15 million. Allegations of devil worship and sexual abuse of the children led to the arrest of Virginia McMartin, her daughter, 2 grandchildren, and 3 other preschool workers.
In what may become one of the biggest child molesting cases ever on record, 7 nursery school teachers were arraigned today on more than 100 counts of child molestation.
The accused include the preschool owner, 76-year-old Virginia McMartin, her daughter, and 2 grandchildren.
Expanding.
1,400 children in this community have been ritualistically abused.
Some children allege that a living creature was sacrificed on the church's altar.
The truth about Satanism is they truly do use blood, and they mix it with urine, and then they also use the real meat, the real flesh. This is what makes Satanism true, and this is what 1,200 molested kids in the city of Manhattan Beach have told the Sheriff's Department.
Despite the extreme and bizarre allegations against them, including that children were being injected with drugs and forced to endure bizarre rituals, including witnessing the death of 20 babies, no evidence was ever found to back up these claims, as the evidence that was given by children was often forced out of them by their parents or therapists, who would often use leading questions with the children and techniques that had led to false memory syndrome.
But the story that initially fed the panic was not all it seemed. In the summer of 1983, a 39-year-old mother called the Manhattan Beach Police Department and accused McMartin teacher Raymond Bucky of molesting her 2.5-year-old son.
In the DA's office, all kinds of doubts developed, particularly about the fact that the mother of the first complaining child was psychotic, but they just kept on going. It was like the Titanic. It was like a roller coaster or a ship that just was out of control and couldn't stop.
The police released Bucky for lack of evidence, but then they sent out this letter to some 200 families, instructing them to question their children about sodomy, oral sex, and fondling.
What happens then is the parents start to talk to their kids, and then they start to talk to each other, and then they start to compare notes, and pretty soon emotionally involved parents are engaging in leading and suggestive questioning of their child.
Despite the length and attention that was put on the case, eventually all the workers in the McMartin preschool were found innocent and any remaining charges were dropped. Simply put, there was no evidence ever found that any of the allegations put against any of the workers were true.
There should have been little animal carcasses, there should have been bodily fluids all over the preschool.
There's never been any proof that there was any kind of satanic ritual abuse or satanic cult activity in a daycare center.
There's also cases in the UK of satanic ritual abuse. In Rochdale in 1990, around 20 children were removed from their homes by social services who alleged the existence of satanic ritual abuse. However, no evidence was ever found, the charges were dropped and the children were returned home. In Orkney in 1990, 9 children were removed from their families due to alleged sexual assault and ritualistic elements. However, the police ruled that the evidence was flawed and the children were returned home. Further cases of so-called satanic abuse in both Nottingham and the island of Lewis were found to be baseless. No evidence was found and the charges were once again dropped. Despite all the allegations from across the world, satanic ritual abuse was found to be completely fictional. The panic of Satanism and satanic ritual abuse was taken by extreme Christian preachers who gave mass seminars on the topic to worried parents, bringing on so-called experts to spread the message and consequently the panic. Whilst there are still cases today of people killing in the name of the devil, they are often drug-related or the act of a single person, not of a widespread group. The idea of Satanism itself is often very misunderstood, and Satanism, devil worship, and other conspiracy theories like the Illuminati and selling your soul to the devil have become mixed into one, making any claim against them likely to be false. In truth, Satanic Panic was based on very little evidence that was snowballed by the media to create the next big folk devil of the 20th century.
The Church of Satan would have nothing to do with something like breeders or abductions of children or stealing of animals or that sort of thing, because Again, the question why certainly isn't very satanic to want to take anything against its will.